And here at home, Gauteng Department of Social Development has come under heavy fire for slashing budgets for services for vulnerable persons. This after Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi again announced his plan to cut 223 million rand from the department. Now, the total cuts this year amount to 405 million rand worth of services in 2 years, according to the Gauteng Care Crisis Committee. Lisa Vetten, Research Associate in Southern Center for Inequality Studies at the Wits University, is on the line with us to shed some more light. Lisa, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Look, talk to us about the direct impact of these budget cuts, especially looking at the vulnerable who heavily rely on this assistance and are often women.
Sure. So I think just to be clear, these cuts are contained in the Gauteng Estimates of Provincial Revenue and Expenditure. So that sets out the budget for the department. The cuts are predominantly in relation to NPO services. Overall, the department budget has had a 3% cut, but the cut to NPO services amounts to just over 10%. And it's why we have this cut of 395 million rand from the beginning of last year to this year. The services we can see that it affects, are protective workshops for people with disabilities, services for people with disabilities, drop-in centres for children, orphan and vulnerable children. It also affects general psychosocial services, mental health services. So they've all had money trimmed off them. They're getting about 10% less this year than last year. So that is the anxiety. I think also because the way the department's budget works is that the financial year runs from 1st of April to 31st of March. So organizations' funding effectively runs out at the end of March. Now, we recently heard from the MEC that by the end of April, they will have made the decision. So what's very worrying is that means that for an entire month, organizations will be operating with a great deal of uncertainty, not sure if they will still have jobs, because we're not too sure where the axe is going to fall in terms of those cuts, and also not too sure if the organization closes, what happens to the beneficiaries, because you need to have a responsible handing over process to ensure that people don't lose services.
Now, Lisa, we understand that, of course, the efforts, the organizations, the NPOs that you've just mentioned, the efforts to get answers have literally fallen on deaf ears. So talk to us about the importance and as well as how vital are such organizations when it comes to the provision of services that government itself is struggling to deliver.
It's incredibly important because, as you pointed out, government doesn't have enough social workers to be able to provide all the services. And I think when you look at what government pays social workers in its employ versus the subsidies that it's paying NGOs, quite clearly they would never be able to employ sufficient social workers in their current budget in order to replace NGOs. That's not an excuse to pay NGOs badly, but it does just highlight the importance of how much NPOs do to augment the social care service in the country. Many NPOs are also drawn from the communities in which they serve, so they know their communities very well. In many instances, you'll find that those organizations in communities are also there because there's no DSD office. So if you were to close those organizations, it would place an additional burden of traveling on people within those particular areas to go and reach a DSD office. So the real importance of NPOs is the way they significantly expand the reach of the state, which is very important. I mean, they add to the value of what government is doing.
Absolutely. And Lisa, look, we've just celebrated International Women's Day yesterday, and judging by the ECORD international request for more women-oriented funding for programs to uplift and empower women, women are still technically bearing the brunt of societal inequality in terms of access to education, jobs, and a host of other opportunities.
Absolutely, and I think this sector is a very good example of that inequality. I mean, there's enough research to show us that one of the reasons why women earn less than men is because they do social caring work, like the NPOs do. And when you look at the NPO sector, it is dominated by women. So when they earn less, it is yet another way of reinforcing that gender inequality. And if you predominantly cut jobs within the sector, the axe will again fall harder on women. And if you remove NPOs and social development cannot replace them with services, then it means that that caring then has to fall back onto the responsibility of women to look after those in their families who need care. And that creates yet another problem, because if we're all saying we want women to go out to work, then we need to put in place all different manner of mechanisms to ensure that their caring responsibilities are taken up by others. But if you remove the services, that's not going to happen, which means that either vulnerable people don't get care, or women or others have to pull out of their jobs in order to be able to take care of their family member. So there are multiple ripple effects here, just in terms of lower wages, higher unemployment, and increased caring responsibilities.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, Lisa. Thank you so much for your contribution today. Lisa Vetten, the Research Associate at the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at the Wits University.